One More Game raises $22 million to build spellcraft strategy game. Now, this is a little bit of a longer update. It's not just an update that they raise money, and I do have a point in the end. But One More Game, or let's just call it OMG. OMG is a game studio built by veteran developers behind Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, Guild Wars. This round was led by Lightspeed Ventures, and also joining in this round are Griffin Gaming Partners, and of course, if somebody says Ex-Blizzard or Ex-Riot, Andreessen Horowitz is there investing right away. That's
Dude, Andreessen must have like a tent outside of fucking Blizzard, right? Just waiting for people to come through to sign up with them. It's like nuts, dude. What is going on?
They spin off like funds and game studios out of Riot. They must have like a corner office somewhere in Riot. But anyways, and good for them. I'm not saying that that's bad. It's just funny. Anyway, the first game from OMG is Spellcraft. It's a PC-first genre-defining online competitive strategy fantasy game. PC first, genre defining, online, competitive, strategy, fantasy game. I just want to say it. There's a lot of things here. Now, the studio has more than 25 people, and they are all remote. The studio is based out of Seattle, but everybody works remotely. The game has been in development, and they're applying this novel, alpha-driven development approach to rapidly iterate on gameplay with feedback from real players. So that means that the announced game, or now announced, Spellcraft, has been operating as a live service with a regular playtest for a small group of players since late 2020. Now, this is nicely put. They're essentially being playtesting, to my understanding, because they said that only about 100 people externally have played this game. So it's not like it's been in live service externally if only 100 people have played it. Maybe this is the reporting that is off in VentureBeat, but I wouldn't call it live service. I would say it's been active testing. Now, investors say that Pat Wyatt, the founder, and James Windsor, the founder, are a killer founding team as gaming establishment meets next-gen gaming, with Pat's 9 years at Blizzard launching Battle.net, multiple iconic games, and then co-founding ArenaNet, and Jamie's history at Riot Games and ArenaNet, said Amy Wu of Lightspeed, and she's not at Lightspeed anymore. She's now at FTX. Okay, on to my take. So,
what's ArenaNet? I don't remember what that is.
It's a developer. I think they had Guild Wars. Was that the game from ArenaNet? Can you check it out? Is it Guild Wars?
This is an online gaming.
Yeah, they did Guild Wars too.
Yeah,
okay,
boom,
yeah,
got it.
So they did Guild Wars too. Very successful MMO.
My take has some to do to this, but more to do what Adam, you talked about in the last podcast, and you talked about Joseph Kim's Game Makers podcast, where he talked about his Series A, and as guest he had his investors who invested in his Series A. Now, one of the investors was Galaxy. And Galaxy does a lot of investment in gaming business, and they're also doing.
Super, you're loud.
Yeah,
I'm loud.
Superstar. Yeah.
Yeah. I can hear you opening a pop or something.
No, I was getting coffee.
Oh, okay.
Edit. Now, one of his investors is Galaxy Interactive, and Michael Fan, who's partner at Galaxy Interactive, was on this podcast, and somehow he ended talking about founding teams, and he was quite critical about these top tier funded game companies, as this one, where they said like Ex-Blizzard, Ex-Riot, big massive company founders, and he said that working at these companies is, I'm paraphrasing, he said that working at these companies is totally different than working at a startup. When you work at these big companies, he said, like when you snap a finger, you got all the resources in front of you, everything is done, all the people are here. And it's totally different than the amount of resources you have at your disposal when you're in a startup. It's just a fraction of that. And if you're not used to it, if you're not used to being scrappy, you'll likely fail. And vice versa, I think, is true for people coming from startups and or small companies and going to big companies. It's just such a different game with the management managing up and not focusing what you're doing, but focusing what you're communicating. Anyways, so what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to undermine OMG here. I'm just thinking about all these studios of Ex-Blizzard, Ex-Riot that have gathered these monster funding rounds, namely from A16Z. And I personally don't know if these companies have shipped anything to date. I just know that there are quite many of these ex-Riot, ex-Blizzard companies. And
so, but
kind of listening to that, I think Michael Fan had a point.
With this one in particular, though, right? Like in this one in particular, they co-founded ArenaNet, which already was a Blizzard spin-off from, what was it, 2000, right? Like they already succeeded as a spin-off, and they built ArenaNet, they built Guild Wars 2, which was a very successful MMO. So I agree with that generalization of Blizzard and Riot employees, but I think these guys in particular, Pat and Jamie, have done the spin-off properly and clearly have been able to ship products outside of that kind of unlimited funding within Blizzard.
Yeah.
So I think they're definitely worth the $22 million.
Yes.
Right. In this case.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think in this case it's warranted. I mean, they've been there, done that, right? They've built a successful company and they sold it to NCSoft, right? So I think they exited. But I get skeptical when I just read these headlines and like some outrageous number is raised by ex big co game devs, because it's like, unless, I mean, there's these sort of environmental differences, and there's the resource differences, and there's the degree to which you have to do stuff yourself that in a big co someone else would do for you. And those are like substantive differences between operating in a startup and operating in a big co. But my bigger question is like, what does that even mean, right? Like, because your experience being like a level designer, on League of Legends or whatever, or like a character balancer on League of Legends, does that qualify you to build a game? I mean, these companies are big, and especially like Riot, like they have, people might argue they have one really big successful hit game, right? But they employ like thousands of people, and so anybody could, and this happens because people come out of Facebook and they did the same thing, but they kind of claim a lot more credit for the success of the game than they probably actually contributed, right? And so if you joined Riot in 2020 and you were like, an economist, or you were a character designer, even a PM, but even a PM for some really specific component of the game.
One
right?
of the 200
does that
PMs.
mean, right? Does that mean you've got success launching shipping successful games? But to me, that does. Or you've got experience shipping successful games. To me, that doesn't. Right? That game was successful. There was momentum. It was a rocket ship. You sort of joined it in orbit and started working on like a rotary piston in the engine 8. Right? Versus like, we built this thing in our garage. Right? Like, so I just wonder like, how much due diligence could possibly be done digging into the actual contributions of these people when they say, I'm X whatever, I'm X big company. And it's not just these companies. I don't want to single them out, but you see this happen all the time. Especially like you get people that are like, I was X growth at Facebook. And then you ask some people and they're like, I never heard of that person. Like, it's like, oh yeah, they were an analyst on the growth team. And they were like, basically the bottom of the ladder. And then they go and pitch themselves as X growth at Facebook. And it's also like, well, they joined at Facebook in 2019. So like, well, Facebook's already kind of an established company at that point. How much did you really contribute?
And just to be clear, I don't mean to dog at all at OMG or One More Game at all. I was just this news came in as I was listening to the podcast with Joe and Michael Fan talking about this, and I kind of raised it up. But there's a clear point. Like, they've done a startup before. And then I just started thinking about there's so many startups that have spun out of Blizzard. I mean, it feels like there's 3 every quarter, and every one of them gets like 15 million seed fund.
Yeah, I mean, my thought here is that like we haven't seen any products from any of these companies that have spun out yet. I think one of the first ones that spun out was Second Dinner, and I imagine that they should be relatively close. But even if I knew, I couldn't tell you.
Bonfire, I think, was the first one.
And Dreamhaven still.
Yeah, Bonfire was the first one.
They have the multiple studios. Yeah.
No, I think Second Dinner was before what's his name left.
Bonfire.
But either way, like on this pitch particularly on OMG, right? Like, these guys have already proved that they can spin off, they can build a startup from ground up with ArenaNet and Guild Wars, and become successful. So they're well worth it. But the one thing is with the pitch, it sounds like it's like a PvP real-time strategy game. And I don't know,
that's
right?
Wow.
like especially to come from MMOs, like the success they have from Guild Wars. MMOs are are big now. Like I think we've gotten over the thing of like there's only World of Warcraft and that's it, right? Why not build a competitive PvP MMO, right? Use that talent instead of going directly against MOBAs right now, which is basically what an RTS game would be.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a bigger. The product challenge is interesting. Like that's, I mean.
Anyways, all the best to OMG. Let's move on.